Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fiat Lux. Today on the show we have Mykola from Web3 Privacy Now. How's it going, Mykola?
Yeah, super sweet. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you. I've been following Web3 Privacy Now for a little bit. I've seen some of the things you guys are working on, and it interests me quite a bit. I think you guys are kind of like pushing the limits, or like really striving for kind of a deeper understanding of privacy. I see like a lot of information on the website, a lot of docs, a lot of like there's a whole database of tools. You have all these kind of things going on. And so I'd love to just today dive into Web3 privacy now and see what your thoughts on it, where it's going, what the idea behind it is. So I guess we could start with what's the sort of core mission behind Web3 privacy? Just for the newcomers, people that aren't aware of it.
Actually, now that you're saying, one word came up to me. It's a catalyst, and I think the catalyst of change. That's where we are, and I think we can hit the nail in the coffin of centralization and really unlock the possibility of kind of like self-sovereignty, ownership on your identity, data, communication, stuff like that related to privacy, and then lead to this kind of like mythological ethos of bigger decentralization as it is. And we're in a nice and interesting point of time when basically there's no infrastructure starting from knowledge to the tooling at the moment. Once everyone is talking that privacy is something normal, and then we prefer kind of like not talk but act. And in that sense, when I date a girl and she's asking, but what do you do? I'm answering, I'm an activist. It's just in tech industry or a tech field. And the activism here is to kind of like how to help millions of people just get the right tooling that will fit the right context and will make their life much more better. And I hope in the bigger run will help us to dodge big tech monopolies on internet and maybe strive towards the better internet in general. And the last my revelation recently was like, oh, we all gonna die sooner or later, and generally speaking our lifespan is super short comparing sometimes to these big grandiose goals we're trying to manifest, like, hey, we change the world, change the internet. And I'm like, let's start with ourselves. So one of the big missions inside is to also make privacy narration more practical, bring more local use cases, highlight local builders, and not be trapped by chasing the biggest possible goals while being smallish people, in the sense that maybe sometimes my privacy is like one VPN in Turkey to access the alternative media sources and not the full stack privacy as we could dreamed of. And by talking this, we do tools as like one of major we're doing right now. It's Explorer. You can think of this as L2Bit for privacy or IMDb for privacy if you're from Web2 world. We also are doing lots of events, researches, and also pushing normalization of privacy through social media. And now we're actively building community, trying to kind of like move away narration in privacy from gloom and doom, big brother watching us, we're all gonna die every day, to more like, let's collaborate, let's help each other, let's share knowledge, let's communicate better, and generally speaking create a culture of really doing stuff than criticizing everyone around within our communities. And I call it communities of care. That helps to kind of like be less egocentric, more open, inviteful, and also understand that some privacy people speak Portuguese, Japanese, whatever the language is.
Yeah,
Not yours, Eurocentric or America centric.
I mean, so you mentioned, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but so you mentioned like big tech and activism, but then also kind of this idea that we don't want to place too much I don't know, weight on these kind of like kind of negative look at the world, because maybe I imagine, maybe in some way that's like stifling, or it puts people off. There's a kind of weight to it, a negative weight to it, and rather than that, you're trying to foster, as you say, communities of care, right? It's more of a positive attitude, and so why do you think, for people that actually aren't aware of why privacy is important, what privacy is, why is it important to do activism, and why are we fighting big tech?
Actually, it's interesting because if you go on the website of Apple, WhatsApp, whatever big tech related big project, you would see that they push privacy a lot. Because, for example, for Apple, it's one of the reasons they could lock you in their ecosystem, and then they basically sell you and upsell other services, and you became a product. Also, kind of helping you. We cannot deny that they really care about security of their products. Second, if WhatsApp with end-to-end encryption and stuff, also propelling privacy, putting it's one of the biggest things on the website. And it seems that it's kind of like a mainstream and something super simple in that sense. And I think the challenge for the decentralized market or decentralized or crypto community in general is that actually what's interesting that maybe we are biased, because I remember 2017 everyone preached for radical transparency. Like people were going on conferences, building tools. We need a transparent government, transparent corporations. I remember use cases like transparent notary. Cool, let's fire all the notaries. Let's put it on, everything's on chain, smart contracts, everything works fine. But transparency. Also transparency for the bureaucrats, but at the same time for the market itself. Like, look, these are our transactions and stuff like that. And I think we were kind of like mesmerized by certain echo chamber and maybe naivety of how the world really works in a way. And I remember clearly we were attacking private chains or corporations who were trying to do Hyperledger plus IBM type of let's do private chain, and we were like, no, that's wrong. That's not a decentralized ethos. We need to do everything transparent way. And I think with time, once we mature, we start to hear alternative voices. Like, for example, people under occupied territory in Ukraine by Russians, they need to do secure communication. If everything will be transparent, they could be dead, they could be prosecuted, they could have lots of troubles in life. And transparency doesn't work there. Or, for example, sensitive documents, if you're a journalist in Mexico trying to work on the crimes of the government, and then again death threats and stuff like that. And I think this happened because predominantly people who build, that's my hypothesis, maybe the people are predominantly white and they live in secure zones, secure spaces, whatever, like Berlin, Silicon Valley, like New York. And it's way easier to kind of like project on others like, hey, I feel super fine, I'm well established in my life, but you or others could do better. And I think if more important projects would appear from more marginalized alternative geographies and continents, we will see a different take on privacy. What people wouldn't even say normal, they would say necessary, should be embedded by default. And this argument shouldn't even exist. There's no point in even discussing it, because my simple argument here is like, okay, imagine that Iranian government knows everything about you. What kind of life would you have in that sense? So I think that it's certain maturity that we achieved as the market, as this kind of wholeness, that suddenly we could talk about this. Second, I think that it's interesting because crypto somehow went extremely centralized with all these centralized exchanges, and casino and all the money around casino kind of hypnotized millions of people, and also degens who went for kind of like cheap dopamine propelled by NFTs. And in the contrast to this kind of like hyper capitalism, there's a bunch of true hackers, hacktivists, who want to do alternative things, and they don't want to live in the world full of NFTs, full of centralized exchanges, and big VC money floating around. And I think that specific pressure from the, let's call it underground for the moment, people helps to kind of like create dichotomy, the same as I don't know, Marvel needs their own DC, Darth Vader needs their own Luke Skywalker. So then there could be dialogue between the different sides, and then maybe there would be disagreement, maybe agreement, but these cracks create something important for the privacy narration itself. Although, one last bit, if you go in contemporary radical bookstores, and I've been at one recently in Barcelona, I saw the book called Mythology of Normality. And basically, academic criticizes the notion of what is normal, because the norm doesn't exist. Who is establishing the norm? Who is responsible for the norm? What are the conditions of the norm? And as kind of like market, we're a bit infantile in a way of like, norm is cool. I mean, I used to live with bipolar person. I don't think norm is cool. Norm is cool. Norm is generalization, and sometimes they're bad things. But we are on the right way because we talk, we experiment, and also that's some sort of evolutionary process for the market, I think.
Yeah, I think the kind of shift, there was an interesting point you made about the shift from away from transparency, and this it was basically radical transparency, not just transparency. It's transparency to the extreme. And people that have listened to this before probably heard me say this and use this example, but to kind of mirror what you were saying about the Ukraine, I always use the example when I'm speaking with people that have kind of maybe not explored the other side of this radical transparency argument. I use the example of North Korea, and I say, well, surely, right, you typically, if I'm having a conversation, we're just talking about this kind of stuff. I'll say, well, obviously you care about all the people in the world, right? Like, you care about permissionlessness and it being a globally accessible thing, right? So they already care about that, even if they have that coupled with the radical transparency. So once you have those two things, then you've established like what they actually value. And then when you put it to them, well, isn't radical transparency excluding, for example, people in North Korea? And it's usually quite obvious to them. Oh yeah, well, I do care about everyone, and especially like the people that are, more oppressed, or at least I feel a kind of responsibility to try and help those people or talk about these issues. And so usually that again, your example, just as good, in the Ukraine. I think people usually understand that, when you give those examples. I don't think that's that hard to wrap your head around, and I found a lot of people are quite receptive to it. You just have to put it in that way, rather than, as you said, we depend when you're talking about big tech and we're being spied on, they're going to kill us and all this kind of stuff. Some of that may be true, but I think if you're trying to convince someone that's on the fence, or maybe they're not on the fence, maybe they're on the other side completely. I've found that often they're quite receptive to that, because it's obvious, right? You can't deny that. You couldn't deny that. It's probably a bad idea for people to be like, transacting on like public, like open blockchains, that everyone can see. If they're in North Korea, that's quite obvious. So yeah, I thought that was a really good point. I think it's a very important one, and obviously something myself and others in the kind of Lunapunk community are involved in. Right, we're trying to kind of push these ideas, and as you said, like maybe remove some of that naivety, right? We did kind of get stuck in an echo chamber, and you know, for a short time, I was sort of there myself. You know, I remember being, oh yeah, that sounds kind of cool. Like, yeah, well, we get the governments and the big banks and all this kind of, if we get them to be honest, and we can see what they're doing. But yeah, I don't think that's really thinking about the issue in the correct way. And when I heard, you know, the kind of arguments, let's say from, you know, people like the DarkFi team, it hit me instantly. I was like, okay, that's obviously the truth, right? How can I deny? That's just obviously true. It's obviously the case. So it's hard to deny once you realize that.
Let me give you one example that kind of like, I like romantic examples as well. So I was a judge at Hackathon at ETHDem, and I was hearing people pitching privacy and security demos. And there was one guy who came and said like, no, yeah, it was Turkish team. They said, we want our mom to do on-chain voting. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. Like, let's bring mom on chain. That's kind of like, what a mission. And then they were like, we're combining one tool, the Maki from Macy, from Privacy and Scaling Exploration, voting protocol, and they're combining with kind of like single sign-on type of key management from Near. So here, basically, what's happening, there's no boogeyman, there's no big brother is watching you. It's just normal thing. Your vote, let's say for a government, for a mayor, whatever, should be kind of like belong to you because it's your right, it's your choice. If you would like to share with your peers whom you voted, come on, let's do. But incrementally, it should be private. And also protecting from speculations, fake votes, and stuff like that. And I think sometimes we just need those simple stories to tell, and then also show how experimentation and R&D and hacktivism is kind of like a mundane daily or weekly routine could also be connected with incremental issues that is just, you just never think of this as in a privacy perspective. But you kind of accept them by default that they should be that way. And while the person who was doing a hackathon, that team didn't really understand the complexity of the global voting, because otherwise I would say start with your community. Like, let's vote not within your mom, but with your Turkish blockchain community, smallish people, decide on your DAOs, wherever, inside your small bubble, and then scale it bit by bit. Or make one hackathon, or whatever, quadratic funding plus an unknown voting here and now. But we could come to this later on. But at the same time, the use cases are just all around us.
Yeah, I like that point about experimentation. And voting's a good one. I've thought about this a little bit, and it seems to me like, you know, once you get into the crypto community and you see all the experimentation and all the research being done and all the different ideas being talked about, and when I contrast that with the traditional world and the traditional system, yes, we have, you know, a variety of different democracies, right, and different ways that they're organized. But when it comes to experimentation, and when it comes to technology and accessibility, you know, functionality, I don't see that much being done, right? Like, we still use ballot boxes. We're still like stuck in this old paradigm. You know, there's like a couple of different examples. I mean, you know, the European kind of voting systems is fairly uniform across most of Europe. And yeah, and not just voting, but sort of by extension, governance as well. Not many experiments in governance. And then when you see what's going on in the crypto sphere, and it's just this radical experimentation, right? There's so many different ways to organize DAOs, different types of DAOs, different ways to vote. You can vote publicly, vote anonymously. There's just a lot good. There's different, you know, quadratic funding, retroactive funding, all these kind of different mechanisms. And I think that's, I think that's really important, right? And I think I don't really feel like people have been doing the work. Or maybe it was the lack of technology, right? The technology enabled us to experiment further. And there's been this kind of like, Cambrian explosion of different voting mechanisms, governance mechanisms. So I really think that's like an important part of crypto, and I think it's probably missed. You talked like about the degens and speculation and things like this, and there's so much more to it that's beneath the surface. The surface. Once you kind of get off Binance and Coinbase, once you go a little bit deeper than just buying some Bitcoin, on Coinbase, you find out there's like a lot of interesting stuff, especially if you're, a kind of an academic person or a technologist.
Unchecked governments have eradicated privacy and truth. Those who resist are brought down swiftly, but we refuse to submit. Lunapunks are freedom fighters, protected by encrypted shadows. The future we're building is sovereign and uncensorable. The moonlit night is coming.
LunarDAO is an investment fund based on Lunapunk philosophy. Sovereign individuals assemble squad wealth to leverage collective strength, become investors, and allocate funds into privacy projects and anonymity tooling, building a portfolio of supported privacy assets. By this, LunarDAO supports the developing teams, expands freedom and crypto sovereignty, and captures value in the upcoming privacy cycle. Any member can exit the squad at any time. Members are anonymous, hence can build Lunapunk vision without fear of frozen funds, legal implications, or any kind of repression. LunarDAO aims to move to a full Anon setup and expand the Lunapunk forest of encryption, a sanctuary where society can redefine itself, self-administrate and regain its economic, political, and moral agency. LunarDAO also supports research on privacy technologies, listed in the wiki at wiki.lunardao.net, and educational structures such as Adalin Academy at adalinacademy.org, where people can acquire knowledge and master skills in programming and economy while developing a philosophical frame to generate the future path of the Lunapunk ecosystem. The launch is coming soon. Stay tuned and follow Lunapunk Squad on Twitter. So I just want to jump back a little bit and maybe talk about what inspired the creation of Web3 Privacy Now. How did that come about?
I think there are a couple of reasons. I have some sort of love-hate relationship with crypto. I quit market several times when I saw that people didn't want to build products. They didn't want to really deliver the protocols. Some of them really wanted to make money on it and run away, but they would never tell you that that's the original intention. You can also call it kind of burnout. And on the last stage of the market, when the market crashed, and when market crashes, the teams suddenly also, the team dynamic changes a lot. Lots of paranoia, lots of stress involved. And I was working in a protocol, everything was chill, good, perfect, interesting people around, doing lots of things around creator economy, decentralizing IP management, and then the market collapsed. And I was thinking like, okay, and the war in Ukraine started. And that was kind of like a, as Timothy Morton calls this, a philosopher, hyper object that we cannot control, but it's beyond our ability to, to change the world. And I was thinking, okay, so what will be the next steps? I don't want anymore quit crypto that easy just because, I don't know, I got burnout again, because also cyclical side of crypto. But what could be alternative and a better market angle than DeFi, because it won't be cool to make white dudes make more money, and not my ideal case scenario. And suddenly a friend of mine wrote me that the Logos project has a vacancy, head of activism. And I'm like, head of activism in crypto doesn't sound crypto to me. What's that? And suddenly I started exploring that direction of like privacy, self-sovereignty movements, manifestos around it. Explored the market, found many other projects delivering privacy, and during my research, I understood that I lack information. I don't know what's happening. Projects are super far away from each other. They don't talk. They don't collaborate. Market is highly fragmented. Not the best moment for the market in general. So I started, okay, like if I want to stay with this market, I need to collect the data. And that's where I'm like, okay, I'm switching to horizontal contributor. I don't call myself anymore Chief Marketing Operation Officer. I want to do GitHub, and I will start with a database of who's doing what in privacy market. So general intention was this value of like, let's understand, bring more transparency what's going on inside. And second, partially it was really bad HR in privacy or HR in Web3 in general, because the standards sometimes recruitment are so poor. So when I was searching for a job, I had lots of these like nightmare things of like irrelevant people discussing whatever potential cultural differences. Some people doing privacy started to pitch, I don't know, DeFi at the same time. Lots of missing information between chaotic management and then gross marketing teams. And at that moment, also the Tornado Cash appeared as the big case, and the whole solidarity movement around Free Alexei Pertsev developer. And I was thinking that, oh, something interesting happening here. Like people are really got together around the movement and also around the human rights, and they became a bit more conscious that like let's make fast money. And at that moment of time, ETH Burno happened, like super true focus on privacy. And somehow I decided like, let's go give a talk on activism, especially coming from Ukraine, bringing all those perspectives. And I think it clicked with many people there. And bit by bit, it became in the form of Web3 Privacy Now and some sort of like is a movement format, because more people started to come and talk and like, oh, let's make it better, bigger, collaborate, contribute to these things. People like Core from ETH Burno helped me a lot at the beginnings, and kind of like there was no, I was doing it for myself, let's say, for a lot of time, and then just people started to appear around, and we just, and now we are a community. But sometimes now I have a feeling that those people were always there. Once recently, I understood that PG, one of our core members, he appeared whatever, like half a year ago or a bit more, and like, hey, a bit more, like a year ago. Oh, I love your projects. I want to do something. I'm like, oh, this guy with a strange avatar wants to do something. What he could do? I'm like, go and edit database, write down which chain, what's the type of state of the privacy in which project, if team is unknown or not, if there's a GitHub, if there's a repository, if there's a documentation and stuff like that. And he went, delivered. I'm like, oh, okay. So people could collaborate, they could contribute. And this sense of, I don't know, like volunteer help and also connectivity to the cause, something that make us exist till nowadays. Although I don't remember exactly, but we exist like a year and a half or something. Yeah. So it's, the creation was a necessity, and now it's totally different game.
Yeah, and I want to say for everyone that's not checked out Web3 Privacy Now, especially the Explorer, and also the database of privacy projects that you have. I think it's amazing. It's great work. I was even looking into doing something myself because I kind of saw something similar, at least, but maybe a little simpler, because your thing's really in depth, and because I saw like a sort of a gap in, you know, the market, if you want to call it that, where And even myself, as even as someone that's technical, right? You can only have a certain level of technical expertise, and your knowledge you only have so much time in the day, right? You only have so much brain power. And if your sole focus is in math, cryptography, networking protocols, being a dev, then it's going to be more difficult for you to. It's not impossible, right? You can learn a lot. You just have to put in the effort and have the time and the energy. But for the average person, and even for the slightly more technical, how are you supposed to know, which protocol is more secure, which types of cryptography are actually cutting edge, and so there's trust involved, there's research involved, but yeah, I thought that would be a really good idea, and I'd love that you guys have like a really cool implementation of it, and a really extensive implementation, and it hits all the right notes, and I think there's even more things than you mentioned. Like you mentioned just sort of like the beginnings of it, but some of the stuff that I've seen, just the level of detail, on and things that you actually want to know, like so for example, if you go to like the wallets, like you're looking at wallets or whatever it is, and then it's what support does it have for which operating system, what language is it written in, how much VC funding did they have, right? There's plenty of sort of not explorers, but there's archives, databases, directories, whatever you want to call them, that try and help with this problem. But I think Web3 privacy might be the first that I saw addressing it in a way that also kind of teaches people at the same time, because as you're looking at some of the ratings and the categories and how it's how the sort of lists are made up, and all the little detail, the properties, of each kind of project, you start to learn, oh, actually, well, maybe I never thought about that. Actually, this project has loads of VC funding, and that one doesn't. This has a grassroots team. This guy's maybe got a couple mil from a bit of a shady bank, or something like that. And yeah, I think it was great. I think I'm like really sort of looking forward to seeing the progress and the adoption of that. And I think that will happen, because I don't see anyone else out there really doing it in the way that Web3 Privacy Now is doing it.
Let me give a small update on this, because sometimes I like to think of ourselves as like a system first, and then the catalyst. In that sense, respectively, today we had two meetings. One meeting, our like leading designer presented the new version of Explorer, when we make it much more useful, easy to understand, and we will ship it like as a version 2, like maybe mid-summer or something like that. And our goal is to make it as practical as possible, but also understanding the purpose. Like, of course, for example, if you're visiting a website and you want to understand how can I privately send files, then service could recommend you. So there will be recommended engine saying, oh, okay, they're decentralized storages. Some of them are private, some are not. That's the level of privacy they have. Do your own research, but at least you will have a short list. Then way trickier with privacy coins, of course, or like a bit easier with privacy messenger protocols, because kind of like lots of things are related to UX UI, and then lots of things related to like if they were compromised or not, or like how legit is the scientific team and whatever the encryption they're using. And what happened by the end of the day, we will create not just a market snapshot like with like 50 data points per every project, but we will create a healthy competitions when basically we will score everything, and we will say, look, those guys, they just promise privacy, but they're not even close. Maybe in a year, nice, you could support them, you could explore them, you could follow them, but don't put your sensitive information or your aspirations on their promise of privacy, while the others hit highest ranks of privacy because maybe they were audited within the privacy features and not within the generic smart contracts. So their level of scoring within the platform is way higher comparing to the others. And I think that this will force all these, like shady or lazy projects to move on, to try to reach harder, try to be more transparent, especially when someone is trying to find out the product readiness. It's a pain in the ass how different teams ship the information about them. Like when you just need to know what the project really is doing, instead of this, they're throwing on you marketing phrases. We change the world. I'm like, no. I just need to know who you are. Are you a storage? Are you an identity? Who you are? Like, and sometimes, and also privacy features, obscure language. So in a way, we are also kind of like a filter that helps to strip down of all the noise and create like, that's where they are. That's what the team, many people who do unknown teams hide, I don't know, lack of developers, for example, because it's so easy. And then the question is like, okay, but how we can protect users? So I don't know, by measuring GitHub contributors and their historical track record, or if it's a new contributor, whatever, for example, unknown, how we would be ensure that he is not malicious actor, but kind of like works pro users. So I think that it's also creating a new narratives on how we really develop privacy and how we progress forward together. And also it's kind of like this kind of like arbiter between the projects and the market, creating also standout projects within the categories. So everyone could follow or maybe even fork successful projects and build better. I mean, we would be super happy to see this. And maybe one reference point here is something like, for example, you go to Bit and you check which projects are really decentralized, and you will see that one or two, and there's no TVL, no one is using them and stuff like that. While everyone fancy TVL, super great numbers, are they decentralized? Not really. And I think that we do the opposite way around. We don't want to promote fancy numbers, but we want to really say like, hey, this is not private. You should be careful because we want to protect people. We want to bring this care to the market. So the auditor, the VC, whatever, the CEO, CDO are really thinking in synchronization to let's provide the highest privacy features possible. And one good example here, this was the case of Nocturne. So Nocturne raised some money, Vitalik supported it, nice, cool. It possibly important project within Ethereum ecosystem, now sunset, but still. So they promised privacy, but then you go privacy policy and they're collecting everything about you, even product related data that they could say, we don't need to collect it. One thing is like you collect the data related to your setup of the company. If you set up in UK, GDPR, all these things. Another thing that you put product metrics and tag people and surveil on them. So in the ideal case scenario, what we also want to provide is kind of like understanding that one thing is a product privacy, another thing is like organizational related privacy, and third thing is like sort of market related, geography related, bigger privacy. So then people won't mix the product privacies like with something else. And this I experienced also in NIM, because many people think that the organization itself should be as private as the product. And this is wrong, because some organizations are set up in Switzerland for a reason, and then they travel the world for a reason, using passport and stuff like that. But the technology could be hyper decentralized. One organization could be centralized. But we need to find a way how to separate those two things, also from the organization itself. And now I'm returning to my argument on L2Bit. Once you will be decentralized, good. When are you hyper centralized, those TVLs doesn't matter. It's just fancy numbers and you are still hyper capitalist. in that sense. But for R&D, good.
Yeah, and that, I mean, just to sort of add to what you were saying, before about the Explorer, and I think and sort of making it simple for people. What I liked about it seemed like there was a sweet spot there. It was simple enough to help people understand and clearly see what was going on, but I didn't feel like it was too dumbed down that it made me like it was insulting. When sometimes you go on you kind of want a little bit more. You don't want to be bombarded with essays about cryptography, but you also don't want the truth to be hidden away from you. You also kind of want to see a little bit of information so that you're informed. And I think that sweet spot's actually really important. And that also brings me on to something that you said in your manifesto. It mentions that you want to promote humanistic UX and UI culture. So I thought this would be an interesting topic to bring up, and it kind of goes off the back of what we were just discussing. What does that mean to you? What is humanistic UX or UI culture?
So today my friend was reflecting on his future in the market, and he used to be creative director, and he suffers working with the tech people because many of them lack soft skills, or so-called soft skills, because it's also a buzzword. But they lack whatever you can call empathy, for example, because sometimes they act as these demiurgs, like, I build this software, everyone should use it, and then they ship in the market, no one is using the software, and then those people they kind of like condemn the others that they don't get it, while the service is so wonderful. We've seen many of those people, and I think when we operate in the world of free software, open source software, many researchers and developers are naive in the way that they don't talk to people for whatever reason. Psychological, they're introverts, lack of experience, skills. And I think that in order to kind of progress more practically, we as the industry lack so-called customer development or a human development when we go and talk with people in the need of, let's say, privacy. One example is here, for example, when I used to work in NIM and we were doing service of our community, above 90% of people were answering, I'm too small for the government to spy on me. And they're right. Like, there's no point of government, to spy on like whatever user XYZ on Discord. I mean, they will spy, but there will be no consequences on that spying. That's the reality. And then when you stop patronizing people with your high-level definition of privacy or idealistic privacy, you come and asking, like, tell me, what kind of life do you live online? Oh, you want to access certain services that are blocked in your country? There's a VPN for that. You want to read alternative media that your dictator blocked in your country as well? VPN for that. Do you, some whatever, like scammers stole your documents from your drive? There's a better decentralized drive for that, and stuff like that. And these stories, this kind of like not one-way street but two-way street communication really helps to kind of understand what people need. And then once you start talking with them much more honestly, they will start sharing with you ideas that basically they need one big button, make private, or perform action, and the privacy will be somewhere super hidden. And many technical people would be hyper surprised to find out that people need not privacy, but totally another, like file transfer. For example, I want to transfer a movie to my friend and I wanted to do it privately for whatever the reason. And then basically the product proposition could be like, I don't know, send files around 5 GB, and then the privacy is just embedded there. But you're selling this business feature that people would willing to pay for. And what I'm trying to say by this, that in a technocratic society, a technocratic point of view, we tend to approach people as so-called users, and it's dehumanistic because basically we strip down them of their context, language, genders, issues, context in the country, poorness, lack of resources, lack of whatever, notebook. For example, in Latin America, in Brazil, many people like notebooks, but they have cheap phones. And do we even ship the privacy to that cheap phone? Maybe not. So and made or produced by obscure company with obscure OS and many other things, and also limited the internet. And I think that humanistic approach to product building and to interaction of people with the services helps us to be more humble and to really start caring about others and not just for yourself and for our ego. And sometimes I tend to believe that saving 10 people is better than saving millions, because from those 10 people you can learn much more than chasing bigger dreams. And I've seen stories from, I won't stop mentioning, like in NIM, we used to have and still have Daniel, who's the head of Latam, a wonderful person who was a hacktivist between hacktivist at the start of 15M movement in Madrid when they occupied Plaza del Sol, and it was a predecessor to all the Occupy Wall Street and other public movements, and it led to Podemos party in Spain, 20 million or something votes, like a big change societal. And this person, he's from different generation of privacy builders, and he is just a nice, extremely nice human being. He wants to help others, and he has many stories when he is bringing privacy to favelas on one notebook, when kids could learn crypto through privacy and maybe look at the privacy from the lens of education, a potential way of going to university, get a profession, start to make money, but through the lens of whatever, running a mixed node or starting to buy crypto or use private features. On the other hand, he is teaching people to run mixed node and start to make money on education. So really linking a specific context of your life with specific feature of the product ecosystem itself. Not necessarily everything should be there private, but maybe there could be some economic incentives, some infrastructural incentives, and also infrastructure around you in your room. And I think this type of human stories enrich the way we look at the world as really complex, not that linear, not that simplified, not black and white. And privacy, when it becomes to be more complex, but also fun, interesting, aspirational, we can really be heard way better, because maybe we can go the next time and pitch whatever, Darkfire, Railgun, whatever project on a big human rights conference full of activists, journalists, but also people from the communities, real communities, not fake Telegram group communities. When people would be like, how can I use these tools now? And you will go, okay, Zcash, shielded transactions, that's example. If you want to send, for example, browsing without noise in advertisement, crypto native, Brave browser, although we can debate if it's crypto or not, decentralized or not, but it's all right that we have those tools as well, alternatives. And I think that we would be much more also, actually, just popped up in my mind. Crypto has a problem with the image. Clearly, everyone's attacks crypto so much, and good that they're doing. So we need to create the positive stories. And when we link ourselves with the really people whom we could help, it's doable. And also we could change the narration in the media, how they see hacktivism or privacy activism in general, because sometimes it's really embarrassing to say you work in crypto, and people are starting to use another buzzwords as substitutions. And I think we are all responsible for those humanistic stories, and they're always about your not just experience, because that's also what Airbnb is trying to sell you. Your life is full of experiences. Not really. It's like just life. It's a natural thing. That's where I guess the privacy could be like applicable to your specific smallish things that maybe matters within your small avatar, your small message to your partner, and that's when we could really succeed.
Just to keep going on the sort of kind of humanistic thing, you mentioned like technocracy or technocratic society earlier. That was one of the kind of terms you brought up, and we've been talking about radical transparency and big tech, and the dehumanizing kind of element of I guess big tech, and then maybe the way that we view people as users. You mentioned. I guess, how do you feel in sort of contrast to what we talked about in the beginning about kind of maybe trying to view things more positively? How do you feel about the future and, because there is this reality, at least in my view, where, what the kind of things we just talked about kind of accelerate and get worse. And yes, maybe the average person might need a different level of privacy for different reasons, might not need absolute anonymity. But, as we become these kind of like, IDs in a database, right? We're all numbers in, a MySQL database. And then the technology gets, like I say, accelerated, and it gets better, and it can track us more. How do you kind of feel about that future? And I'm sure you would agree that privacy is going to get even more important in the future, and even more obvious, actually. I think, we're kind of like, we're sort of seeing the issues arise. We can sort of point to these examples of like in Canada, in the truckers, and then the war in the Ukraine. We can talk about what was the other one? In Iran. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
COVID.
Yeah, I mean, the examples are endless, but these are all been quite recent. And maybe a decade ago we had like a little bit of a rumble with Facebook, and everyone was like, oh, maybe Facebook's a bit, dangerous. Obviously we had the whole Five Eyes, we had, Edward Snowden, and there has been a lot of sort of exposure, and the public has seen kind of some of the darker sides, but I think, we've only just got to kind of like a kind of stage one of AI, right? And that's coming. And so, yeah, just to I don't know, see what you think about that. Like, how do you view that future?
So let me start from one thing that when pyramids were constructed, I guess the worshippers who were going to pyramids, they see them as these mega structures, way like God's creation. Like, you're so small to those big constructions that you feel yourself as an ant, obedient and follower and a worshipper, and you are ready to follow any command. So I think the same happens with the negative news around us, because it's interesting that when I'm thinking about war in Ukraine specifically, or a COVID, we were trapped in doom scrolling. But not just that, many people were trapped into fighting with each other instead of literally solving the problems by uniting, because that's the only way. Sometimes putting aside your own political differences, beliefs, religious differences, whatever. And I was thinking recently that sometimes I got bored about these mega visions of let's fix the internet, because maybe I will die before anyone would whatever fixes. But I would be interested in fixing specific issues. And now I'm playing around. I'm writing an article on like how the future internet could look alike that solves the problem of Ukraine. One example, super simple. If you go Ukraine top store YouTube trends, you would see many Russian videos. Like, how on earth you can have Russian media targeting, for example, women above 50 who watch a series be available in your media landscape? How in the hell you can have a content made by pop singer, Russian rap singer or a trap singer, who makes kids be non-political by propelling the culture of like whatever postmodernism, nihilism, consumerism, buying brands and rejecting whatever the previous generations were taking care of. And there are really specific issues related to, for example, inability of big tech be responsible proactively with those things, or like Telegram having many not even fake accounts, but literally like accounts of your enemy available in your phone is something outrageous, and there's no responsible person. And it's interesting ethical thing on censorship, because kind of like we're acting that we are censorship resistant, and I'm saying that's not a universal thing, because we're inventing universal theories on the future. We need to be hyper applicable. Who will censor? Who will be censored? What the content will be censored? What the I don't know, transactions, communication will be censored? How and why? And by putting it to the specific context, you could understand better what's achievable, what's not, what could be the redesigned way of we should communicate with each other and connect with each other. And also kind of like I'm a bit tired of having too many people around complaining about how the world is bad, because at certain moment you kind of like as if you're in not just an echo chamber, but you start to feel that, oh, I heard this story 100 times. And I'm kind of bored with the same stories. I like to feel new stories, hear new stories. And also I like to be inspired by people trying to solve the stories. Or bringing the stories that really empowering each other. Like I made something that helps someone, those things. And I think that my alternative to doom scrolling, to negative mentality, to negative bias, and to it do the opposite. Literally, if you disconnect from those people who destroy conversations, connect with those people who create things, and not patronize them that they're not that private, or they use Mac versus PC, or that they have have Android OS and not Graphene OS and stuff like that. Because sometimes, and you can clearly see what's happening right now, many people with their Graphene OS are like super minority, like literally 10 dudes in the room, while the person with Android OS can make a conference for 1,000 people and 100 builders delivering 50 use cases. And it's kind of like, I would better do something new than spend my life with those dudes, like hunting the ghosts of our past. And I think that what's missing right now in conversation is emotional state of the internet and the information around us, because clearly we kind of once we're talking about just technology, we think that it's neutral in a way how we absorb it, and that's not true. We're traumatized by it, and we don't know, like the way people act and process information sometimes in the privacy landscape, for example, is like hyper trashy in terms of when you do trolling around privacy, like, hey, look at the FTX dude, haha, how stupid he is, when basically you need to kind of like say, yeah, that's a criminal. We need to build better systems. We need to support more responsible companies, and we need to act together. And there's my master plan, or that's 5 steps I would do. And that also is interesting critique of post-COVID remote culture, because I will state to everyone, I'm a bad remote worker. I need to connect with people. I like to brainstorm in a room. I like to exchange ideas, have this spark, drop things around. I'm a that person. And also I need the mirror with whom I can talk. And if I would do it with myself, I would be a bit, like isolated and paranoid. And what's important here to also say that remote culture is not natural. It propelled through the world because of the COVID, and we think as a granted. And many people cannot emotionally cope with isolation, especially when their isolation is propelled through these chats and groups, and they think of this, oh, we have a community, we have people around, and suddenly, no, you're not. You don't know what's your favorite movie. You've never been with me in the gallery, whatever. You don't know my books. You don't know my previous lover. You don't know the name of my cat. So how we're connected here? And in that sense, I think that we need to make a step back and really critically look at us, like at our emotional state. Some people do need to go to therapy, and then recalibrate the filters we use with the social media or with the messaging platforms. And last but not least, if you will calculate the amount of messaging tools you're using right now, and also the way you use them, sometimes you can be terrified, because I have 7. One is for my mom. One is when my mom is sharing photos of my mother-in-law, because that's a connectivity with my daughter. And I cannot have aggregator, and maybe for better, for security reasons, but it's a bit too much. And it's a big distraction. And if you would think of yourself, what would be the other way around? So my solution will be separate project management from messaging tools, separate your personal life from your so-called work or a community, because now they're merged, and many people, it's really hard for people to be bombarded in the same messaging tool by mom, by boss, by partner, by whatever colleagues. And we should really kind of like do step back and consume less, but then connect better, and kind of like talk, be heard, and do stuff on a smallish level. And also, but be open to burnout of other people. We experienced in our team recently a kind of emotional big blow from one of the team members, and that's also consequences of the remote work, because also we are super different, and if we will be in the room, we will be maybe faster, find out the certain middle ground. But because remote and sometimes technical versus humanitarian, that's a catastrophe.
Yeah, kind of what you were saying reminded me of a point that a person called BitCarrot, who goes by the name BitCarrot, said in one of my podcast episodes that was on Lightning. And this person was obviously a quite a heavy Bitcoiner, and so they were skeptical of the whole Ethereum model, the DAOs. But they did bring up a good point, and I think you're right that we are humans at the end of the day. And yeah, of course, technology is great. It's great that we can message each other. It's great that we can do things like this. But the majority of people need that connection, and not only that, as you said, it makes you work better. I think, again, for the majority of people, being around a team, in a building, in a creative space with people, being able to bounce ideas, I think it just makes for better. Absolutely, it makes for better work.
One thing here, sorry to interrupt you. One of the hilarious examples, because I spent a lot of years in the advertising industry. Many companies like Google, they pretend that they know people because they own the data. And they used to have a framework for selling their context advertisement. I forgot the name of the framework, but they were saying that that's the way. That's how people make decisions on the way for them to buy a new pair of shoes. But then certain years passed, like 3, 4, and they start to say the using phrase messy middle. They were saying like, we know the entry point, whatever, Google search. We know the end point, like buying shoes, but we don't have a clue what's happening in the middle, because your decision making is spontaneous. Maybe you have a good day yesterday. Google cannot define if you had those days. And basically, the more you invest in this middle of chaos, the better will be the outcome. And I think that's the whole metaphor of like our online presence. Sometimes it's spontaneous, chaotic, non-controlled, and that's who we are.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely agree. And yeah, I mean, just to finish the point, the person basically said that, you know, localism is a philosophy that we should kind of be exploring. And the I guess the kind of, you know, global DAO kind of thing. We basically shouldn't be what this person was alluding to is it seems like from the outside looking in that the sort of the DAO idea, the online digital community that can vote and take part and have a shared treasury, seems to be like something that they're trying to apply to everything, and that people think, oh, this will solve everything. We'll all have our own DAOs. We'll have, you know, these like state DAOs, you know, network states and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's great, because there are obviously systemic, you know, global issues that would be great, you know, if there was like global DAOs that took care of certain things, and public goods funding and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I agree, and there is definitely something to be said, the fact that, you know, it's somewhat unnatural, and that our brains don't, you know, we don't want to admit it, but I think we are, you know, more recently, but like our brains don't cope really well with all this screen stuff and the social media and the notifications. I mean, one, just to riff on your point about having 7 different messengers, I've thought about this too, and, you know, sometimes it does get too much, but then sometimes I'm like, it is too much, but I also like the idea that it's like for security, that I've actually got quite a few, and maybe a bit more than the average person, and so all my stuff's kind of split off into different areas. But one thing I did years ago, and I haven't undone this habit, I put my phone on silent, maybe, I don't know, 6-7 years ago now, and it doesn't come off silent unless it's really important, you know, unless like, you know, grandma's in the hospital, right? My phone doesn't come off silent. And what that enables me to do, instead of the phone pulling my attention to it, I have to decide to give my attention, you know, to the phone, to the screen, swipe down the notification thing, read each one. And I almost can't remember what it's like to not have that, but, you know, I do vaguely, but I remember the feeling and the experience of, you can sense it. You can feel your concentration being like pulled away from things when it ding, you know, and then each application has its own notification sound maybe, and that gives you a different feeling. And there's a lot going on, you know, and consciously or unconsciously, subconsciously, all of this stuff's affecting us in I think ways that we don't realize until, you know, you do something like, you know, turn your phone off, or don't live, you know, you put the screens away for a whole month, and you just go and, you know, go camping for a month, and then you go, wow, like I didn't realize like how fresh I feel, you know, I feel so like invigorated and energized, and I'm not so distracted. Anxious, negative thoughts, you know, all that kind of stuff might dissolve, you know, and I think people notice that. I've certainly noticed that. I mean, I'm not saying anything new here, but I suppose for the younger generation, you know, it's quite scary to think that it's even harder for them to maybe come by this kind of these ideas, or this more like natural approach, because they're gripped by it even more, right? The technology encroaches on their lives even more. At least we were kind of around before, you know, there was a time when you didn't have a mobile phone, right? You had to go and like, you had to go to your friend's house, you had to knock on the door, and you'd be, hey dude, you coming out to play? You know, we're going to the park or whatever, you know, and now, you know, I imagine the kids all text each other, just as I would with my friends, you know, I don't just turn up at the house, but that used to be a thing when I was a kid, you know, I would just walk around to a friend's house. I didn't know if they were going to be in or not. I didn't know where they were, and it was fine. You know, everything was fine. We just worked it out. And I'm not trying to be one of these, you know, oh, it's better in the olden days kind of things, but more so to speak for the sort of mental health and like the feeling of community, belonging, and ease, and just like not neutrality, but what's the word, like contentness. You know, I think a lot of these things make you less content. It's not good for your brain and your mind. And so yeah, I really agree there. I think that's a great thing to kind of keep discussing just over and over and over again, because that issue is only going to get worse. People are only getting pulled more into technology, and every day these science fiction, again, not to paint with too much of a negative brush, but the reality is, yeah, every day it's like, some of these science fiction kind of narratives seem more true. You see more people looking like zombies, just like crossing the road without looking, just looking down at the phone, texting you. Like, dude, people are like risking their lives like to go on the phone and stuff, and again, not to be that, shouldn't be on your phone, like not that old guy, but when you really think about that, how crazy it is how many people like text and drive now, just that, like put on all the privacy, crypto, all this kind of stuff to the side, just a basic thing that we see a lot now. It's insanity, it's like people are, like I say, people are risking their lives just to send a text.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that we can learn from the others, and I have this kind of like a bit playful but metaphor, like how Buddhist stack would look like technological. Maybe there will be one button, shut down everything, go meditate, or there will be less intrusive visual interface. Like I am using launcher for my Android device that has stripped down all the color iconography, so there's no color light that distracts me, and it's super easy to kind of install, and so it's user friendly, or a human friendly in my case. I don't need to read the deep manual to just go and enjoy life. And sometimes I think that I dated some people recently, and I understood that some of them are in a loop of negative thinking because of the trauma, stress, just life in general. And I think that this is the tragedy of life, that many people cannot go and start, like getting more energy to just do stuff, not necessarily fighting with each other. And if you're in a loop of this kind of regressive thinking, of course you're not productive, you're not creating, you're not supporting, you're not loving, because that's the other dynamics. And then it's interesting, like what could we do, like what kind of life we want to live, and does this life require others? Oh, so much. When I work in the teams, I can learn so many things from the different generations, cultures, genders, whatever you can imagine, and it enriches life. And in that sense, maybe sometimes I also have the trick of saying white people's problem, because in many cases, like what we think of the problem is just like nothing compares to other people. And when I was in Uganda several years ago, there kind of nothing to do, so you experience time differently. It's not our internet time, bam bam bam, millions of events, whatever, but it's just like stillness, so kind of like you control the time and you own the time. And by looking and interacting with the different examples, we could really a bit switch our mind in the sense of, oh, it could be different. And that's why traveling a bit help. That's why talking with others help, and asking them, like, for example, in relation with privacy, like, hey, why do you need that? Oh, just for one small thing. How often? Once in a week for 10 minutes. Perfect. That's this scenario. If you will ask Monero people, like 365 days a year and all this stuff, full on. But respectively, they all at the same level of, I don't know, humanness. And in that sense, I guess that we need to search for those empowering stories, and also understand how the informational noise affects our behavior. So sometimes we will stop and say, hey, sometimes there's a necessary evil, but that's a reality. Maybe sometimes we need to communicate with CoinDesk so they would write about privacy. They're not writing. because there's no stories to tell, there's no interesting people that will kind of reflect on privacy. And that's our, like, we can talk a lot how they're centralized, biased, commercial, blah blah, but we also need this tribune. We also need to reach the masses, because out of the masses become a new wave of developers and researchers and stuff like that. And sometimes we kind of like need to find the middle ground. And I lost actually this notion of, oh, you have VC money, you're evil. Really? I saw people transferring VC money to the right hands. That should matter. Like, what would be the impact with those money for good versus whatever VCs are doing? And sometimes with our ideological thinking, we're going from two extremes. Either like world is super bad, we demand the ultimate solution, and it doesn't exist. It doesn't work like that. Bit by bit, stepping stones.
I absolutely agree. And I think that's a great line to sort of finish on. I just want to give you the chance to say basically anything you want. You have the floor. I do this for all my guests. Anything you want to talk about, any questions you have, anything about Web3 privacy that you don't think you've explained that you would like people to hear, and then just where they can find you. So you've got the floor.
Yeah. So I will always say, you can come for the idea, but stay for the people. Try to connect with people, find your tribe forever, the group of people with whom you would love to go in a bar, to go in a cafe, to spend some time. That's because we're humans. We need connections. We need to talk. I mean, personally, I like to joke, and I don't want to put my jokes on chain because maybe sometimes they're too dark. But that's my cup of tea. And in that sense, come for the people. Don't be mesmerized by technology as a magical bullet. Sometimes maybe that's not the case. The case is your connection with the people and what you create together instead of specific chain, protocol, solution, whatever. Even if it's a fancy design, has lots of money or less money, ideological or not. Ideological people could be bastards. That's reality. That's okay. From our point of view, we try to act as people who care about the important issue, but we don't look at this, I guess. We have different stories how we came to privacy. I think that privacy is a good tool to counter surveillance capitalism, to really disrupt big tech business models, to really get away from them owning your data, your internet, your communication, whatever. And even if this is a metaphor, it's enough to act. Sometimes not having a solution is also a solution, because then you can think around a lot how to change your life, maybe for better. Maybe in someone's case, privacy is like reading a book and being away from internet that wants to advertise you and wants to sell you the next video on YouTube. In that sense, Web3privacy.info, we is trying to do this entry point. Twitter is a nice place to follow us. We're kind of super open to contributors, but we don't have time to manage everyone. So in that sense, we appreciate self-starters and people to be more like proactive. And also the nature of collaboration changed a lot in these days. We don't have big bosses telling you what to do. We love people just to build a better privacy infrastructure, especially within the knowledge. We just started a Telegram community. We were opposing it for sometimes because part of our community, like radical part, escaped to metrics, a real metrics, not the Morpheus metrics or Neo metrics. And I found personally their echo chamber of several dudes, poor engagement, versus we can go for a mainstream social messenger that is by facto social. We will have much more bigger engagement by having also super private thing aside. And my personal aim is to reframe nature of collaboration, so people would really collaborate, would really share not necessarily positive but productive storytelling. That's an important news, that's important product release, that's an important event, that's an important book to read, a podcast to watch, and stuff like that. Basically empowering each other, also on the road to be more smarter, interesting human beings. And we are doing events in Berlin, Prague. I want to do ETCC, but we need to discuss it because every event is hyper consuming in terms of the energy. And we don't want to sacrifice our life, but to be really kind of to keep playfulness around it. And also events for us is like a click that builds connectivity between the people, and also having people like David Chum at our last event was super good to see. Nobody expected him to come, and then things just happening. I really want to see redirection of support, financial, resource-wise, from many organizations contributing to privacy projects that kind of like make the market bigger instead of competing with each other. So I think that I would love to see this happening this year. And in that sense, I want to see more, I don't know, support and care within each other. And what we're missing at the moment, like an ecosystem as a whole, is a certain vision where we want to be. And I articulate this vision: let's bring 100 million people into privacy. So what do we need to have that? We need to have really bigger transparency. We need to have much more mature audits. We need to have much more mature builders. Builders are inventing not cool demos for hackathons. Let's help them to understand how to ideate better for privacy. Let's share with them more use cases that are legit and necessary at the moment. Let's connect them and match them also with investors. Because if they maybe will receive a funding, a specific research would propel, especially with ZK But also let's not be too overwhelmed with this tech magic, because if a bastard is doing technology, then the product will be that directionally. And a good example here is the women who invented ZK in terms of who wrote one of the first papers. I recently heard that the use cases she's advocating right now is hyper unhuman rights. So one thing is to praise the technology or research. Another one, let's not create a cult figures around what we do, and let's be a bit like a cold shower and like be more attentive to what's going on around us, and start to learn other languages. I know super wonderful privacy enthusiasts from Hungary. I know interesting people from Catalonia. I know interesting privacy advocates from Brazil, Mexico. I don't know many in Asia, but I know a ZK researcher in Singapore, hyper interesting. And just think that it's already a big family of privacy people. We just so decentralized that we need to get together somewhere or somehow and need to understand each other better. And I think that's enough to kind of succeed to a degree. Then we are all together, I know, getting in a year, and we were like, wow, we achieved so much just because we started to listen to each other and help each other, and kind of like also filtering those who are toxic. I know those people.
Yeah, really well said. That's a great message for people to hear. So obviously, guys, I'm going to put all the links in the description. You'll be able to find Web3 Privacy. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks very much for coming, Mykola. I appreciate the conversation. It's been fun. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.
Thank you very much. Peace, peace.